By 2005, the punk rock aesthetic had taken hold in pop culture, including gaming. Games like Tony Hawk's American Wasteland were a reflection of this trend, setting an expectation for how extreme sports games at the time should look, feel, and most importantly, sound. A much-loved snowboarding series would take a similar approach, and while the next installment brought some interesting ideas, the franchise would move away from what made it so special. My name is One Hip, and thanks for clicking on this video. For this retrospective, I played the PS2 version of SSX On Tour through PCSX2, and I'll be exploring On Tour's background, gameplay, level design, customization, soundtrack, and legacy to discover why this game divided fans. With a new creative lead, EA Canada began development for On Tour for consoles in mid-2004, while EA Montreal worked on the PSP port. According to line producer Steve Anthony, the team added a career mode called the Tour to encourage player customization and give them a choice in campaign progression by completing races, trick events, or a mix of the two. He also stated that while SSX3 had a beautiful open world, the player was alone most of the time. In order to add more life to the map, NPC riders became part of On Tour's mountain. Producer Tim Fields claimed that they wanted to add new features to the franchise to bring in new players, while also staying true to what fans wanted. And art director Rich Curran stated that the SSX franchise looked too slick and produced, so they went with a sketchbook art style concept to take the franchise in a different visual direction. When SSX On Tour was released on 6th gen consoles in mid-October 2005, its reception was mostly positive. The PSP version, while receiving complaints about its camera and controls, was still received well. Critics praised On Tour's punk rock aesthetic, gameplay, and the introduction of skiing, with criticism for its frame rate drops, less detailed graphics, and a lack of direction with the campaign. The GameCube version offered Mario, Luigi, and Princess Peach as playable riders, with an exclusive Nintendo-themed map. Longtime fans lamented the sidelining of the original SSX characters, being relegated to only being playable in quick play. On Tour's visual style and simplified trick system also divided fans, and the lack of online multiplayer was considered a notable omission. Playing On Tour for the first time after the original trilogy, at its core it still plays like an SSX game. However, like the visuals, the identity shift is noticeable through its gameplay and level design. After watching On Tour's sketchbook intro video, set to Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden, I immediately felt the shift that EA was going for. The main crux of the game is the Tour, where I progressed my custom character up the rankings, earning cash and building hype by completing races, trick events, and non-sanctioned shreds. I was able to choose to be a snowboarder or skier for my campaign, but I was disappointed that I couldn't switch between them with my rider. As I was racing fan favourite Elise in my first shred, SSX's sense of speed felt less pronounced, as On Tour is capped at 30 frames per second. This was negated somewhat by the motion blur effect that kicked in as I blasted down the mountain. Shredding through snow and ice felt like past SSX games, solid and engaging, while grinding and hand plants were a breeze to pull off, much like in SSX3. Nailing grabs and flips in later events filled my boost meter, allowing me to complete monster tricks, with the background going dark with a large monster text next to my rider. Grabbing boost tokens increases this instantly, and maxing it out gave me an unlimited meter for a short time. Enabling monster tricks with the right stick kind of felt like a blend of the flick it and nail the trick mechanics from Skate and Tony Hawk's Project 8 respectively, both of which are predated by On Tour. Despite being a great way to rack up points, monster tricks were less satisfying to use moment to moment, like Uber tricks were, and the sideways camera angle when performing them made it hard to time my landings. Often, I had plenty of airtime where I could have maintained my combo for more points, and there were other times where I'd wipe out by landing earlier than I anticipated. I had a go at skiing in quick play mode, and while I appreciated the addition, I stuck with boards for the majority of my playthrough. Like earlier games, you can knock down or get into close calls with race opponents, and now other NPCs, which adds to your hype. You'll be challenged by SSX characters in one-on-one events, unlocking them to use in quick play when they're defeated. Beloved characters like Simon and Cowrie return, as well as a few new ones like Sid and Sky. But the absence of OGs like Moby surprised me. As well as the traditional race and slopestyle events, shred challenges have you completing an objective for cash and hype. There's even a floor is lava type shred, where you can only touch snow for a certain amount of time. I quite enjoyed that one. There's a great mix of shred events here, which break up the event structure of the tour. Free ride is unlocked after passing the amateur tier, allowing you to freely roam the entire mountain while collecting any cash tokens you may have missed. On Tour's level design is terrific, with multiple routes toward the finish line as you avoid NPCs and objects like trees and rocks. Courses are tighter and denser than before, encouraging the use of grind assets like rails to propel you forward. And I loved the placement of these assets. When timed right, you can grind across several of them in one combo, which continues your flow. Jumps are clearly signed with coloured sketches, and alternate paths are now indicated by a Yeti sign, rewarding you with more trick assets and hidden cash tokens. Flying through a camera icon enters an automatic photo mode, complete with a gap name, tying in with On Tour's sketchbook aesthetic. But despite this, the tracks were less memorable than earlier games, and at times I couldn't distinguish between certain courses, as they seemed to blend in together. And while On Tour's level design felt solid, its visuals didn't feel as consistent. While I like On Tour's mostly black and white sketchbook design, which kind of reminded me of Tony Hawk's American Wasteland's more colourful style, I felt that the character models weren't as detailed as earlier games. I noticed this especially with the original characters, with many of them looking less pronounced than before. The reduced detail overall, at least on the PS2 version I played, made the graphics look blurry at times, and experiencing occasional lag during certain sequences added to this. It was quite a contrast considering the gameplay and level design are quite solid, and the game's visuals dampened the experience for me. On Tour brought familiar and newer SSX staples to its design, and as well as a rock-heavy soundtrack, the game also brought avatar customization to the franchise. Thanks for still being here with me. I hope you're enjoying this one. If you want to see new content, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Thanks for your support as always, and anyway, back to the video. Before setting out for the tour, you pick a male or female custom character and can choose from typical assets like hair colour, skin tone and clothing. You can also adjust your rider's height and weight. And of course, being an Aussie, I just had to go for the Outback mustache. You can change your style at any time by visiting gear, clothing and barbershops, with new items being unlocked by purchasing them with cash earned from events. Rewards can also be unlocked as you progress, offering sponsored clothing and boards, with their own cash bonuses on top of your prize money. And you're going to need to earn as much as you can, as some of the prices are eye-watering. For example, new boards with higher stats can cost upwards of 5 figures, while attributes, like boost gain and toughness, range from $300,000 to $1.5 million in-game. Despite these hefty price tags, they do come in handy later in the game, as there's a huge spike in difficulty later on. New monster tricks can also be purchased, adding to your preferred style. And while having the right gear for barreling down the mountain is essential, a soundtrack to go with it completes the experience. And SSX On Tour delivers this in spades. On Tour's visuals aren't the only dynamic change for the series. Its mix of rock, punk, metal and hip-hop is, in my opinion, the best in the series so far. And while SSX's electronic and big beat playlists are long gone here, On Tour's heavier variety fits perfectly with the game's punk aesthetic. Heavy hitters like Overkill by Motorhead are accompanied by melodic hip-hop tunes like Sidden Sideways by Paul Wall, as well as indie numbers like Banquet by Block Party, and even punk bands that are featured in Tony Hawk games like Fu Manchu and Goldfinger appear in the game, adding to the punk vibe that it's going for. It's a high-octane mix of tracks that are perfect for shredding down courses. While not as revered as its predecessors, SSX On Tour brought in some interesting ideas that makes it stand out as a solid title in the franchise. By the time SSX On Tour was in production, EA Canada wanted to pivot the series. SSX in 2000 introduced the series defining characters and courses. Tricky took these to the next level, and SSX3 gave players a huge mountain to freely explore. There was only so much that could be improved on for the rest of the series without it going stale. The team set out to change the overall direction of the franchise, and while this shift was welcomed by critics, it divided SSX's loyal fan base. On Tour maintained the SSX experience through its solid and engaging gameplay, immersive level design, and robust soundtrack. Customization for your own character was a genuinely welcome addition to the franchise, offering a personalised experience for the player. Despite these positives, some other changes like its loss of atmosphere, lack of character, and simple monster tricks, which were previously hard to perform, weakened what SSX used to be, adding to the game's criticism. These changes make SSX On Tour feel more system-driven rather than world-driven like earlier games, which clouded the series' identity. To me, SSX On Tour feels like the end of an era. Previous games were heavily exaggerated with a somewhat futuristic aesthetic. On Tour stripped it back, making its identity more DIY and personal for the player, letting them play as an avatar instead of a character, which ties in with the punk rock revival at the time. For some, it's a bold experiment that holds on to the series' roots while walking its own path, and for others, it's a step away from what made SSX special. SSX On Tour set out to establish its own identity, and for that, it deserves its place in the franchise.